Marcus Chen stared at the holographic message floating above his desk, reading it for the fifth time. The words hadn't changed, but his understanding of them kept shifting like sand in a storm. Congratulations on your upcoming union with Princess Zarathek of the Valdorian Empire. The ceremony will commence in 30 Earth days. His coffee had gone cold an hour ago. The engineering reports for the Mars Colony project lay forgotten beside his keyboard. Everything felt surreal, like he was watching someone else's life unfold through a window. The door to his apartment hissed open, and his father walked in without knocking. Admiral Robert Chen looked exactly like what he was, a decorated military officer who had spent 40 years making tough decisions. His gray hair was perfectly combed, his uniform pressed to razor-sharp creases. "Dad," Marcus said, his voice surprisingly steady. "We need to talk." Robert's expression didn't change. He'd worn that same neutral face during congressional hearings, treaty negotiations, and probably while signing whatever document had just turned Marcus's life upside down. "I suppose you got the message," Robert said, settling into the chair across from Marcus's desk. "Got the message?" Marcus stood up so fast his chair rolled backward. "Dad, according to this, I'm supposed to marry an alien princess I've never met, in 30 days. Princess Zarathek is highly educated, speaks perfect English, and comes from one of the most influential families in the Valdorian Empire." Marcus rubbed his temples. "That's not the point. The point is that apparently my own father arranged my marriage without telling me." Robert's jaw tightened slightly. It was the first crack in his composed facade. "The Valdorian trade agreement is worth 12 trillion credits annually. Their military alliance could protect Earth from the Krex expansion for the next century. So you sold me. I secured humanity's future." The two men stared at each other across the small apartment. Outside the window, the lights of New Geneva sparkled in the evening darkness. Somewhere among those lights, other families were probably having normal conversations about normal things. Marcus envied them. "How long have you been planning this?" Marcus asked. Robert was quiet for a moment. 3 years. 3 years. Marcus sank back into his chair. 3 years you've been negotiating my life away. And you never once thought to mention it? The negotiations were delicate. One wrong move could have collapsed the entire alliance. What about what I want? What about my plans? I'm supposed to lead the Mars terraforming project next year. The Valdorians have terraforming technology that's centuries ahead of ours. As Zarathek's husband, you'd have access to knowledge that could transform not just Mars, but dozens of worlds. Marcus wanted to be angry. He wanted to shout and storm out and tell his father exactly what he thought of being treated like a bargaining chip. But underneath the shock and betrayal, something else was stirring. Curiosity. He'd spent his whole career pushing the boundaries of what humans could achieve. The Mars project was just the beginning of his vision for humanity's expansion into space. If the Valdorians really had advanced terraforming technology— "Tell me about her," he said quietly. Robert's posture relaxed slightly. "Princess Zarathek is 26 in Earth years. She has advanced degrees in xenobiology and atmospheric engineering. She's also a decorated pilot in the Valdorian Space Corps." "A pilot?" "She led the evacuation of the Kepler 442 colonies when the Krex attacked, saved over 2 million lives." Despite himself, Marcus felt a spark of interest. "And she agreed to this marriage?" "Valdorian marriages are often arranged for political reasons, but she had the right to refuse. She chose to accept." "Why?" Robert hesitated. "She's studied human culture extensively. According to her father, she's intrigued by our species." Marcus stood up and walked to the window. The city spread out below him. Millions of people living their lives, unaware that their future might depend on whether one human man could learn to love an alien princess. "What's she like?" he asked, without turning around. "I've only met her twice, during the treaty negotiations. She's intelligent, direct, and has a sense of humor. She also asked specifically about you." Marcus turned back to his father. "About me? She wanted to know about your work, your interests, your personality. I got the impression that she was as nervous about this arrangement as you are." For the first time since receiving the message, Marcus felt something other than panic. If she was nervous too, maybe this wasn't just a cold political calculation. Maybe there was a chance for something real. "What happens if I say no?" he asked. Robert's expression grew grave. "The Valdorians will view it as an insult. The alliance will collapse. And when the Kreks come, and they will come, humanity will face them alone." Marcus closed his eyes, the weight of an entire species' future settling on his shoulders. "No pressure." "Son," Robert's voice was softer now, "I know this isn't fair to you. If there had been any other way—" "But there wasn't." "No, there wasn't." Marcus opened his eyes and looked at his father. Really looked at him. For the first time, he saw the exhaustion in the older man's face, the lines of stress around his eyes. This decision hadn't been easy for him either. "When do I meet her?" Marcus asked. Relief flickered across Robert's face. "The Valdorian diplomatic ship arrives in 5 days. There will be a formal introduction ceremony, followed by a week-long cultural exchange period." "Cultural exchange?" "You'll learn about Valdorian customs, she'll learn about human traditions. The actual wedding ceremony will blend both cultures." Marcus sat down heavily. "This is really happening." "Yes. But Marcus, for what it's worth, I think you two might actually like each other." "Based on what?" "Based on the fact that when she heard about the Mars project, she asked if she could contribute to it. Apparently, the Valdorians have been working on atmospheric processors that could cut the terraforming timeline from centuries to decades." Despite everything, Marcus felt his pulse quicken. The possibility of accelerating the Mars project by that much would revolutionize human space colonization. "She said that?" "She did. She also asked if Earth had any interesting engineering challenges that might benefit from Valdorian technology." Marcus stared at his father, pieces clicking into place. "You told her about me specifically because you knew she'd be interested in my work." Robert's slight smile was the first genuine expression Marcus had seen from him all evening. "I may have mentioned that my son was leading humanity's most ambitious terraforming project." "You manipulative old bastard." "Language, son." But Marcus was almost smiling now, too. It was still an arranged marriage to a complete stranger from another species. It was still his life being decided without his input. But maybe, just maybe, it wasn't the disaster he'd first thought. "What's her species like physically?" Marcus asked, then immediately felt awkward for asking. "Valdorians are humanoid, taller than most humans with silver-blue skin and larger eyes adapted for their sun's different light spectrum. They're actually quite striking." "Dad." "What? Next time you want to arrange my life, maybe give me a heads up?" Robert stood up, straightening his uniform jacket. "Hopefully there won't be a next time." After his father left, Marcus sat alone in his apartment, staring at the holographic message that was still floating above his desk. In 5 days, he would meet Princess Zarathek of the Valdorian Empire. In 30 days, if all went well, he would marry her. He pulled up his computer and began researching everything he could find about Valdorian culture, technology, and history. If he was going to do this, he was going to do it right. Besides, any woman who could pilot evacuation ships and wanted to help terraform Mars was probably someone worth getting to know, even if she happened to be an alien princess his father had picked out for him. Marcus adjusted his dress uniform for the 3rd time, checking his reflection in the mirror of the diplomatic reception hall. 5 days of intensive research had taught him more about Valdorian culture than most humans knew, but it hadn't done much for his nerves. The reception hall buzzed with activity. Diplomats from a dozen worlds mingled with Earth's political elite, all waiting for the arrival of the Valdorian delegation. Marcus spotted his father near the main entrance, deep in conversation with Secretary General Williams. Neither man looked in his direction. "You look like you're about to face a firing squad," a familiar voice said behind him. Marcus turned to find Sarah Mitchell, his project partner from the Mars Initiative. Her red hair was pulled back in an elegant bun, and she wore the kind of diplomatic dress that she normally reserved for funding presentations. "What are you doing here?" Marcus asked. "Your father invited me. Said I might provide moral support." She studied his face. "How are you holding up?" "I'm about to meet the alien woman I'm supposed to marry in 3 weeks. How do you think I'm holding up?" Sarah's expression softened. "Marcus, you know you don't have to go through with this, right? No matter what your father says about humanity's future." "Actually, I do." Marcus had been over this argument with himself 100 times in the past 5 days. "The Kreks won't stop with the outer colonies. When they come for Earth, we need allies. And you need to sacrifice your personal happiness for that?" Before Marcus could answer, a low harmonic tone filled the hall. Conversations stopped. Every head turned toward the main entrance as massive doors slid open with barely a whisper. The Valdorian delegation entered like something from a dream. They were tall, just as his father had said, but Marcus hadn't been prepared for how graceful they would be. Their movements seemed to flow like water, each step perfectly balanced. Their silver-blue skin seemed to shimmer under the hall's lights, and their large, dark eyes took in everything, with an intensity that was both alien and oddly familiar. But it was the woman at the center of the group who captured Marcus's attention completely. Princess Zarathek was stunning in a way that transcended species. She stood nearly 6.5 feet tall, her silver-blue skin marked with intricate patterns that seemed to shift subtly as she moved. Her hair, a deeper blue-black, was arranged in an elaborate style that incorporated what looked like small crystalline ornaments. When her large, dark eyes swept the room, they seemed to catalog every detail in seconds. She wore robes that managed to be both elegant and practical, with subtle technological elements that Marcus's engineering mind immediately wanted to examine more closely. Everything about her suggested someone who was equally comfortable in a royal court or a starship's bridge. "Okay," Sarah whispered beside him. "I can see why your father thought you two might get along." Marcus barely heard her. He was too busy watching as Zarathek's gaze found his across the crowded room. For a moment, everything else faded away. She was studying him with the same intensity he was studying her, and there was something in her expression: curiosity, nervousness, maybe even hope. Then the moment passed as the formal introductions began. Secretary General Williams stepped forward. "Your Highness, on behalf of Earth and all humanity, we welcome you and your delegation." Zarathek inclined her head gracefully. "Thank you, Secretary General Williams. We are honored to be here." Her voice was warm and clear, with only the slightest accent that made certain consonants sound almost musical. The formal presentations continued for what felt like hours. Marcus was introduced to various members of the Valdorian delegation: scientists, military advisors, cultural attachés. Each was impressive in their own way, but Marcus found his attention constantly drifting back to Zarathek. She was clearly paying attention to the proceedings, but he caught her glancing in his direction several times. Each time their eyes met, she would look away quickly, and Marcus found himself doing the same thing. Finally, the moment he'd been dreading and anticipating arrived. "Your Highness," Secretary General Williams said, "may I present Marcus Chen, son of Admiral Robert Chen, and your betrothed according to the terms of our alliance." Marcus stepped forward, his mind racing through everything he'd learned about Valdorian greeting customs. He placed his right hand over his heart and bowed slightly from the waist. "Your Highness," he said in carefully practiced Valdorian, "I am honored to meet you." Zarathek's eyes widened slightly in surprise, and something that might have been delight flickered across her face. She responded with the traditional Valdorian greeting, her own hand over her heart. "The honor is mine, Marcus Chen. Your attempt at our language is charming." There was definitely amusement in her voice now, and Marcus felt his nervousness ease slightly. "I've been practicing, but I'm afraid I probably massacred the pronunciation." "Only slightly," she said, switching to perfect English. "But the effort is appreciated." An awkward silence followed. Around them, the reception continued, but Marcus was acutely aware that most of the room was watching their interaction. "Would you like to see the observation deck?" he asked suddenly. "The view of Earth from here is spectacular, and it's quieter." Zarathek nodded. "I would enjoy that." They made their way through the crowd, trailed discreetly by two Valdorian guards, and what Marcus assumed was a human security detail. The observation deck was a transparent dome that offered a stunning view of Earth hanging in space above them. "It's beautiful," Zarathek said softly, moving to the transparent wall. "The blues are much more vivid than our long-range sensors indicated." Marcus joined her at the viewing wall. "What's your home world like?" "Valdor Prime has 3 moons and a red sun. The landscape is mostly crystalline formations and metal forests, very different from Earth's organic diversity." She turned to look at him. "I've studied your terraforming work extensively. The biological complexity you're trying to recreate on Mars is fascinating." "You've studied my work?" "I've studied everything about you I could find," she said, then immediately looked embarrassed. "I mean everything public. Your engineering papers, your project reports, interviews you've given. I wanted to understand what kind of person I was being asked to marry." Marcus felt a strange combination of flattery and unease. "And what did you conclude?" Zarathek was quiet for a moment, studying his face. "That you're someone who dreams of building new worlds for people to live in. That's admirable. What about you? Besides being a princess and a pilot, what do you do?" "I'm an atmospheric engineer like you. I also study xenobiology, how different species adapt to new environments." She hesitated. "I volunteered for this marriage." "Marcus, I want you to know that." "You volunteered?" "When the alliance negotiations began, my father presented several options for strengthening the bond between our peoples. Marriage was one of them. I could have refused." "But you didn't? Why?" Zarathek turned back to look at Earth. "Because I've been fascinated by humanity since first contact. Your species accomplishes incredible things, despite having no natural advantages. No enhanced physiology, no advanced technology, no telepathic abilities. Just determination and ingenuity. And you wanted to study us up close?" She looked at him sharply. "Is that what you think this is? A research project?" Marcus realized he'd offended her. "I didn't mean it that way, This whole situation is strange for me. My father arranged this without consulting me. And now I'm supposed to marry someone I just met. Do you think it's any less strange for me?" Her voice had an edge now. "I'm binding my life to someone from an alien species based on diplomatic reports and public records. At least you're on your home world, surrounded by your own people." They stood in tense silence for a moment. Then Marcus sighed. "You're right. I'm sorry. This is hard for both of us." Zarathek's posture softened. "Apology accepted. Perhaps we could start over?" "I'd like that." Marcus extended his hand. "Hi, I'm Marcus. I'm an engineer who's scared out of his mind about this whole marriage thing, but I'm trying to keep an open mind." Zarathek looked at his outstretched hand for a moment, then took it in both of hers. Her skin was cooler than human skin, and her hands were larger than his, but her grip was gentle. "I'm Zara. I'm a pilot and engineer who's equally scared, but who's hoping we can figure this out together." They shook hands solemnly, and Marcus was surprised to realize he was smiling. "So," he said, "want to tell me about these atmospheric processors your people have developed? Because I have about 1,000 questions." Zara's face lit up. "You really want to discuss the technical specifications? I've been thinking about nothing else for 3 days." "Well," she said, moving closer to the viewing wall, "the basic principle involves manipulating atmospheric pressure differentials to accelerate chemical reactions." As she began explaining the technology, Marcus found himself genuinely engaged. Her knowledge was impressive, and the way she described complex concepts was clear and elegant. More importantly, she was clearly passionate about her work. Maybe this could work after all. "Marcus," Zara said after they'd been talking for nearly an hour. "Yeah? When we marry, will you still want to work on the Mars project?" "Of course." "Why?" She smiled, and it transformed her entire face. "Because I was hoping you'd let me help." 3 weeks later, Marcus stood in the same reception hall, but everything had changed. Where before there had been nervous diplomats and careful political conversations, now there was celebration. The wedding ceremony had been a fascinating blend of human and Valdorian traditions, and Marcus was still getting used to the ornate silver bracelet on his wrist that marked him as a bonded partner in Valdorian culture. More importantly, he was getting used to being married to Zara. "The atmospheric processors should be ready for testing within 6 months, Zara was saying to Dr. Elena Rodriguez, the head of the Mars colonization project. "The preliminary simulations suggest we can establish a breathable atmosphere in specific regions within 2 years instead of 20. Marcus watched his wife, and he was still adjusting to that word, explain her technology to some of Earth's top scientists. Over the past 3 weeks, their relationship had evolved from awkward formality to genuine partnership. They'd spent hours working together, comparing human and Valdorian approaches to terraforming, and Marcus had been amazed by both her knowledge and her enthusiasm. "Marcus," his father approached, looking more relaxed than Marcus had seen him in years. "The Valdorian High Council is extremely pleased with how the cultural exchange has proceeded." "And the Krex situation?" Robert's expression grew serious. 3 more outer colonies have gone dark in the past month. But the Valdorian fleet arrived in the system yesterday. For the first time in 2 years, I think we have a real chance." Marcus nodded. The weight of knowing that his marriage had helped secure humanity's survival was still strange, but it was getting easier to bear, especially since the marriage itself was turning out better than he'd dared hope. "Admiral Chen," Zara appeared beside them, having finished her conversation with Dr. Rodriguez. "I wanted to thank you again for making this possible." Robert smiled. "I should be thanking you, Your Highness. My son seems happier than I've seen him in years." Zara glanced at Marcus, and he saw warmth in her large, dark eyes. "The feeling is mutual." After Robert moved on to speak with other guests, Marcus and Zara found themselves alone near the observation deck where they'd first really talked. "So," Marcus said, "how does it feel to be married to a human?" "Strange," Zara admitted. "But good strange. Human emotional responses are more intense than I expected." "Is that a problem?" "No." She moved closer to him. "It's refreshing. Valdorian culture values emotional control above almost everything else. But humans feel things so deeply, and they're not afraid to show it." Marcus thought about the past 3 weeks. Zara had been gradually opening up, showing him glimpses of personality that went far beyond her royal training. She laughed at his jokes, even the bad engineering puns. She got excited about technical challenges in a way that reminded him of himself. And when she was focused on a problem, she had a habit of tucking a strand of hair behind her ear that he found unexpectedly endearing. "What about you?" she asked. "Any regrets about marrying an alien princess?" "Just one," Marcus said, and saw her face fall slightly. I wish my father had told me sooner. We could have been working together all this time. Her expression brightened. Speaking of working together, I have something to show you. She pulled out a small device that projected a three-dimensional hologram into the space between them. Marcus recognized the surface of Mars, but overlaid with data he'd never seen before. This is a complete atmospheric analysis using Valdorian sensors, Zara explained. The data goes back 50 years. Marcus studied the projection, his mind racing. These mineral distributions, we've been working from incomplete data. Exactly. The iron oxide concentrations in the southern hemisphere could be used to accelerate the atmospheric conversion process. Instead of starting with the polar regions like your current plan suggests, we should begin here. She highlighted several areas on the holographic Mars. That would cut the timeline by at least another year, Marcus said, his excitement building. Zara, this is incredible. There's more. She manipulated the projection, showing different data layers. Valdorian deep core sensors have detected underground water reserves that your surveys missed. The implications for colonial placement are significant. Marcus stared at the data, then at his wife. You've been working on this for weeks. I wanted to contribute something meaningful to our partnership, not just the marriage alliance, but something that was ours. The way she said ours made something warm unfurl in Marcus's chest. This wasn't just about political necessity anymore. They were building something together. Princess Zarathek, a new voice interrupted them. They turned to see Ambassador Cathara, one of the senior Valdorian diplomats, approaching with what Marcus had learned to recognize as an expression of concern. Ambassador, Zara replied formally, and Marcus noticed her posture straighten into a more regal stance. We need to discuss the reports from the Outer Rim, Cathara said in Valdorian. Marcus understood enough to know they were talking about something serious, but his grasp of the language wasn't good enough to follow the rapid conversation that followed. However, he could read the increasing tension in both women's body language. What's wrong? He asked when they switched back to English. The Kreks have accelerated their timeline, Zara said, her face pale. They're moving toward the inner colonies faster than anyone predicted. Cathara nodded grimly. Our intelligence suggests they plan to strike at the heart of both the human and Valdorian territories simultaneously. The joint fleet will need to deploy immediately. Marcus felt cold dread settle in his stomach. How immediately? Tomorrow, Zara said quietly. The celebration around them continued, but Marcus felt like he was suddenly standing in a bubble of silence. Tomorrow. They'd been married for less than a day, and already the war was pulling them apart. I have to go, Zara said, and he could see her struggling with the decision. My squadron is among the fastest in the fleet. They'll need every pilot. Of course you do. Marcus surprised himself with how calm he sounded. How long will you be gone? Unknown. These kinds of operations can last months. They stood there for a moment, the weight of the situation settling between them. 3 weeks ago, they'd been strangers forced together by political necessity. Now, just as they were beginning to build something real, the universe was trying to tear them apart again. Marcus, Zara said softly, if something happens to me, don't. He stepped closer to her. Don't say that. I need you to know that these past weeks have been the best of my life. This marriage started as duty, but it's become something much more. Marcus looked at this remarkable woman who'd come into his life so unexpectedly. She was brave enough to pilot evacuation ships, brilliant enough to revolutionize terraforming technology, and kind enough to worry about his feelings even as she prepared to fly into battle. Zara, he said, I love you. The words surprised them both. They'd been dancing around deeper feelings for days, but Marcus hadn't planned to say it like this, in the middle of a crisis. Zara's eyes widened, then filled with something that looked like joy mixed with sorrow. "I love you too." She kissed him then, right there in front of the assembled diplomats and dignitaries. It was their first real kiss as husband and wife, and it tasted like beginnings and goodbyes all at once. When they broke apart, Ambassador Cathara was politely looking away, but Marcus caught her slight smile. "I'll be back," Zara promised. "We have worlds to build together." "I'll be here," Marcus replied, "working on our Mars project." She smiled at that, their project, not just his anymore. The next morning, Marcus stood on the observation deck of the space station, watching the joint human-Valdorian fleet depart. Hundreds of ships, from Earth's newest destroyers to the graceful Valdorian cruisers, accelerated away toward the outer rim where the Creks waited. Somewhere in that fleet was his wife, and Marcus found himself praying to whatever gods might be listening that she would come home safely. He pulled up the holographic projections she'd given him and began working. The Mars project had new urgency now. If they won this war, humanity and the Valdorians would need new worlds to expand into. And if they lost, well, Marcus preferred not to think about that. Either way, he had work to do. 6 months later, Marcus was reviewing atmospheric conversion data when the communication alert chimed. The holographic display showed Zara's face, transmitted from somewhere in deep space. She looked tired but triumphant. "Hello, husband," she said, and Marcus's heart leaped at the sight of her smile. "Hello, wife. Please tell me you're coming home. The Creks have surrendered. We'll be back within the week." Marcus closed his eyes, feeling a weight lift from his shoulders that he hadn't realized he'd been carrying. "Thank God." "Marcus, I have news about the Mars project. The Creks had atmospheric processing technology that's even more advanced than ours. As part of the surrender terms, they're sharing their scientific databases." "That's incredible." "It gets better. The Joint Council has approved a massive expansion of the terraforming initiative. Not just Mars, but 12 other worlds. And they want us to lead it." Marcus stared at her image, hardly daring to believe what he was hearing. "Us?" "Us, co-directors of the Galactic Terraforming Initiative. Humans, Valdorians, and even some Creks scientists working together to build new homes across the galaxy. Zara, that's everything we dreamed of." "I know. And Marcus, I have one more piece of news." Something in her tone made him pay closer attention. There was a hint of nervousness in her expression, but also excitement. "What is it?" "Human-Valdorian hybrid pregnancies are apparently possible. The medical team confirmed it yesterday." Marcus felt the world tilt sideways. "Are you saying—" "I'm saying our family is about to get bigger, and our children will be citizens of 2 worlds from the day they're born." Marcus laughed, a sound of pure joy that echoed through his empty apartment. His father's political maneuvering had started this whole crazy journey, but what had begun as an arranged marriage for diplomatic purposes had become something beautiful and real. "I love you," he told the holographic image of his wife. "I love you too. See you soon, partner." As the transmission ended, Marcus turned back to his work with renewed energy. They had worlds to build, a family to start, and a future that was brighter than anything he dared to imagine. His father had pulled quite a stunt behind his back, but Marcus was beginning to think it might have been the best thing that ever happened to him.